Hello and welcome to the second series of Rhythm Section's Future-Proof Masterclasses. I'm really happy to introduce our first guest of the series, DJ, radio host, mentor and founder of London's Run Dem Crew, Charlie Dark MBE, who is here today to talk to us about building sustainable universe in the music industry. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into things, I'll just briefly explain what Future Proof is all about. So Rhythm Section, as I hope most of you know, is a South London-based record label and dance that has been releasing music and throwing parties for over a decade now. And Future Proof is Rhythm Section's 6-month artist development program designed to support 6 emerging DJs and producers from across England to develop their individual skills and industry know-how ready to become future creators, future leaders in the electronic music scene. So we created Future Proof so that we could share the knowledge and the expertise our team and peers have accumulated over the years, and to demystify the industry, level the playing field, and equip aspiring artists with the skills they need to build lasting careers in the music industry. For this second year of Future Proof, we're taking the program on the road. We're going on tour. This evening, we're at the brilliant Jumbi in Peckham. Big thank you to Jumbi for hosting us. But over the next 5 months, we'll be traveling to Bristol, Manchester, and Leeds, and Newcastle, holding a masterclass and an after party in every city we visit. So big shout out, first of all, to our year 2 cohort. We've got them all here today. Indaflow, Field Motion, Limmy, Luvandula, Abby Harris and Princess Trium. So nice to have you all here with us. And a big thank you to Arts Council, Beatport's Diversity and Parity Fund, Ableton, Audio Technica and Cradle for making all of this possible. I'm Amelia. I've worked at and with Rhythm Section for over 7 years, and I'm one of the team running Future Proof alongside Emily, who you heard from before, and Bradley, and the rest of the Rhythm Section team. So, without further ado,
Dun, 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 dun.
Charlie, I know that self-care and well-being sit at the intersection of your work in both music and in athletics. So I thought it might be nice to start off by hearing a little bit about your work with Run Dem Crew and talking about this idea of turning community into a movement.
Okay, cool. Let's get into it. Right, so I spent the 90s signed to the coolest independent label in the world, Moax. Then I signed to A&M, and then I got a very big deal with Sony Records. And I thought I was on the path to being a megastar pop star because everyone around me was blowing up. Porter's Head are killing it, Massive Attack are smashing it, Warp are killing it. It's going really, really well. And unfortunately, what I always say is that Sade's heart got broken. And so basically she delayed the release of her album on Sony, on Columbia. And basically as a result of that, lots of the subsidiary labels then got axed. And the label that I was on kind of was a casualty of that. So kind of made this amazing album, and it came out, and our A&R man kind of left the company, and we were just kind of left to our own devices, and eventually we got dropped. And it was a really big wake-up call, because from the ages of 16 to 31, 32, my path had been, I'm going to be a big-time DJ, and I'm going to smash it in the music industry, and I had a very big reality check. So my mental health was in a pretty bad state. I had a young daughter as well, and was just really super disillusioned. And my whole thing was I didn't feel comfortable just kind of going to therapy, taking medication and waiting to be better and waiting to be happy. So I started running 2006 Christmas Day. I'm like, there's 500 pairs of trainers in my house. There must be one pair that basically is going to be good for running. So let's go. And it was one of the most humbling experiences that I've ever had, because I thought I'd be good at it and I wasn't good at all. And it reminded me of what it was like to be a beginner. And it just kind of clicked off, this moment of failure just kind of clicked off this idea that you should keep doing this, because actually you might have failed, but you feel quite alive. So I kept on running in secret at night because I didn't want anyone in my neighborhood to see. I didn't tell any of my friends. And then one of my friends noticed that basically I was changing. My body shape had changed. I lost like 2 stone. I was a bit more alive. He was like, "What drugs are you on?" I'm like, dude, I'm not on any drugs. Like, I started running and he fell on the floor laughing. And then eventually he was like, well, you know what? Could I come with you? So we started running together. And I just had this kind of idea that I was just like, this is really good for me. And, I was looking at the music industry and it was at a time when a lot of my peers, it was the beginnings of your peers getting ill, dying, passing away, suicide, kind of like suddenly the music industry is not such a rosy place. And I just wanted to share it with as many people from the music industry as I could. But I thought in its present state, it needed a bit of a remix. Because at that time, running was very much solo, has to be hard, you cannot smile, you're not allowed to do it with friends, and you should only talk about running and VO2 max, and it has no connection with the rest of your life. But I literally started running, and my life started to improve. At that time, I'm in a studio in Bethnal Green. I've got Loafer on one side, and I've got The Bug on the other. Dubstep is killing it. The music I'm making, no one wants to hear. So it was a really kind of weird period of time, and the running really got me through it. And I started with myself running and my mate, and then we increased that to 5 people. We grew that to 30. That grew to 50. And then before you knew it, we'd kind of grown it into this international movement. Started working with various different brands. And, that's kind of been my path for the last 17 odd years.
Wow. Long journey.
It's been a long journey. We've been doing it a long, long last time.
Yeah. It's really, thank you for giving us the origin story there. I appreciate that, because something I wanted to ask you was because, looking at, how far it's come, it can seem sometimes like, standing at the bottom of a mountain and looking up. But I wanted to ask you what's a good place to start with all of this if you're thinking about trying to improve your health, your mental health, or your physical health, and think about how that supports your career. Where's a good place to start with that? What are the small steps that you can take?
Well, I think one of the first things you should do is take a piece of paper and write down, at what point do I want to retire from the music industry? And do I want to come out of the music industry by choice or by force? And what I realized, is that health is wealth. And I realized that actually, if I want to stay in this industry for as long as I possibly can, to keep contributing to it and helping shape it for as long as I possibly can, then I need the health. Because I've seen so many people who kind of were successful but weren't healthy, so couldn't enjoy all of the hard work that they put in. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think is forget what you were doing at school with sport. Because a lot of people don't want to do it once they, leave school. One, because there's no one to organise it for them. But secondly, because it reminds them of moments of vulnerability at school. School is very much concerned with those who can come first, second and third. The rest of you are making up the numbers. So many of us will have a traumatic experience, whether being thrown into the swimming pool or having to go on the cross country and coming last, or being laughed at and ridiculed because we couldn't keep up. And so we think that's the barometer of success. I always say to people, it's not how fast you go, it's how you cross the finish line. So once you realize that, I think the main thing is, don't even start with running, just go for a walk. And just put it in your diary as like, I'm just going to wake up, go for a walk, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. It doesn't matter. Because ultimately, times are a bit like A-level results. The older you get, the less people ask you. The less basically your exam results influence the opportunities available to you. We're not doing it to impress people who don't move. We're doing it because we want to stay alive on the planet for as long as we possibly can. So it just starts with being very, very gentle with yourself. When you go out, you're just like, what did I see on my run, on my walk? What did I learn about myself?
Yeah, and I think it's a useful exercise of, it's interesting that you talk about school because, it's drilled into us from a very young age to engage in this system of kind of meritocracy where results, performance, your ideas of what success means is based on where you land in that scale. And the taking part is kind of secondary. And so... yeah, I think that's also something that applies, when it comes to DJing, when it comes to DJ gigs, when it comes to making music, looking at the plays you've got, looking at the numbers you've got at your gigs, and realizing that everyone has to start somewhere, and actually to be able to still find the joy in it and still hold on to the joy in it. there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
I get my best ideas when I'm out moving, and I think it's there's something really exciting about going out, moving your body, realizing it's good for you, and then coming home and making something influenced by what you've just seen.
Yeah.
I make the best music when I'm moving. When I'm just sitting in the studio, just hey, I'm just being a full-time musician, just in the studio 24/7, I'm just making nonsense, and so I think it's really important to get out.
Yeah, I know we touched on it before when we caught up, and this idea that, people kind of idolize that dream of being a full-time musician, and it is a dream. It is an amazing thing to be able to achieve, but sometimes having more balance across our life allows us to appreciate the experiences that we get, are privileged to have as an artist, as a performer, and allows us to savor those moments and bring the fullest version of ourselves to them.
You're more interesting as an artist who does multiple things than one who just is solely doing this.
It's that thing of staring at a blank piece of paper, isn't it? And not knowing where to start. When you pile on that pressure to yourself and you're like, okay, this is my sole purpose now. And this is, everything rides on what happens on this piece of paper. You're almost setting yourself up for a fall.
I think the common thing that people don't realize is a lot of times when you write down the people who you're most influenced by, most inspired by, there's a common thread. A lot of these people move in some way. They meditate, they're doing yoga, they're running, they're swimming, they're on the bike, they're doing something. They may not be shouting about it, but it's something that's part of their daily process.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why a lot of these people are at the top of their game. And I never understood that. I'd go into LA and DJ with LA DJs, and we'd be on the bacon sandwiches and they'd be on the salad. We'd be like, you guys are so weird. And they'd be talking about going to the gym. And we think it's weird. And now you look at them and they're the top people in the world.
Is that again, it's something that that you've mentioned before, this kind of CEO mentality, and this idea of approaching your music, approaching your craft, approaching your career, approaching music, approaching DJing as something that is approaching it seriously, taking yourself seriously. It's difficult in an industry like this when there are temptations all around, and there's the very infrastructure of it sets you up to have late nights and drinking and all the rest of it. So you have to be quite rigorous and quite disciplined, I think, and it happens over time naturally. And, we all kind of have to learn our own way. But how important, I mean, it's quite clear that there's a very strong link between mental health, well-being, and creativity and productivity. But yeah, I assume it's something you think is essential to a long-lasting career.
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize that it's called the music industry and the music business for a reason, because it is an industry and it is a business. And if you think about industry and business, essentially it's make as much money. And a lot of times it's about exploiting people in order to do that. So I think that once you understand that, you realize, okay, I'm in an industry that's been set up to chew me up at some point. So what can I do to build my resilience and my mental strength? I actually see a lot of people who go into the music industry where I'm like, I don't think you're really strong. There's other things you could go and do. I don't think you're mentally strong enough to survive what you're going to encounter, because you do meet a lot of idiots. And you do meet a lot of people who basically will make your self-worth be tied into what you're doing. So you will have situations where you're constantly being reminded you're not good enough, you're not special enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not beautiful enough, you're not talented enough, by people who are lesser talented than you. You need to have the strength. So I had a situation on the weekend, where there's a couple of venues on my dream list to play. And as you always find out, a lot of times the dream place you want to play doesn't want to pay you dream money. Because they're like, well, we're a dream venue, so you should just do it. And blah, 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 did it, and blah, blah, blah. And, I sent them to my agent. And my agent said, this is how much we would like for this. And I'm just sitting there being like, I got, 3 kids, ex-missus, to me, and I got bills to pay. And the person kind of wrote back with this thing of he's not worth that. Do you mean? And I'm like, and he would never command that sum of money here. And I actually just sat there and laughed because actually I had like, a 10-mile training run the next day. So I was just like, I'm going to go out there, crush 10 miles. And every time I do it, I'm thinking about I'm crushing you. But basically what I'm saying to you is like, it doesn't mean anything to me because I've got this other thing that I can go to where I'm using my physical body to get me from A to B. And it's showing me that, yes, Charlie Dark, you are indeed enough.
You're getting validation from yourself.
You're getting validation from myself. So I don't need it. So it's very easy to be like, oh, you don't want to pay the fee? Cool. We're not to do the gig. And that's okay. And that's a really important lesson to learn, that you should never allow anyone to make you feel that they're doing you a favor, that you're not worthy to be in the room, that 100%. You're an imposter because you're there for a reason. There's something that you've done.
They've come to you.
Exactly. That has made you pop up on their radar. And I think especially now, it's kind of, it's really easy to get dragged into this thing of, I am not enough. I am not worthy. And when you start doing that, then you start questioning your art. Then the tunes start to take longer to make. Everything starts taking longer because now you're second guessing yourself. And I think, the artists I really like are the ones where when they turn up, they're like, the records I brought is what you're going to hear. The music I make is what you're going to deal with. No compromise. Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay to have that self-confidence in yourself.
And essential, like in an industry, I know you've said before, is full of sharks, to have that sense of self-assurance and confidence. And it's easier said than done. Sometimes we need to fake it until we make it,
I think, regardless of what level you are, whether you're just at the beginning, OG, veteran, at the moment, we're all going through the same stuff. Mm-hmm. I've had some really interesting conversations with some people who I consider to be like, oh my God, you are like a don. You've done it. Who are like, I don't play in the city where I live. I can't get booked. That's why I'm in Europe all the time. You're like, really? Still, they're still facing a lot of the same things that we face because, especially as a traveling DJ, it's a lonely world out there, and you do have to deal with some people where you're like, actually, if this was any other situation, we'd be having a problem now. But because you're employing me to share music or play music, I have to put up with this behavior that I wouldn't tolerate in my everyday life.
Yeah, there's a lot in that, isn't there? And I often think that, and this again doesn't just apply to the music industry, but the only person you can rely on to have your back is yourself. You need to have your own back. You need to back yourself. And it's important that you can stand up for yourself, in those situations, but also, maintain a professionalism, obviously, but be sure of yourself, know your worth.
Yeah, really, really important. I used to have like a 20-foot mural in my garden that said, I am enough. So it's the first thing that I would see when I woke up in the morning and the last thing I would see at night. And then when we took that down, we put it up in the house. So we have like a list of things in the house. I'm enough. I'm strong. I'm loved. I'm valued. I'm needed. And then so on and so forth. Before I leave the house, before I go and do a gig, I look at it just to remind myself. Because my anxiety used to get really out of control. I'd find myself in these situations where I'd be like really, really questioning myself. And actually, at the end of the day, it's not, playing records for people is not rocket science. Making tunes, especially these days, it's not that hard, And so actually, it should be something that you're like looking forward to and it's fun.
That's so interesting because I was just thinking about how this idea of enough and what it means, and how in our mind we always have an idea of what enough is until we meet it, and then the goalpost shifts. We always think, oh, when I get 100,000 plays, or I play this venue, as you just said, then that'll be enough. That'll be me. I've made it. And the reality is that once you get to that point, you realize either the ceiling is lifted and I want to go further, or okay, maybe that isn't giving me the sense of total fulfillment that I thought it would. And it's important I was thinking about the idea of being present and being able to enjoy the experiences without always looking forward, without always thinking, what's next? Where am I going? And the joy in the process and how essential that is to it being sustainable, you know, not always chasing, being able to enjoy it. Yeah.
A lot of times I think we are not present. As DJs and musicians, we've been taught as a musician, it's kind of, you press play and you're watching the line go from one side, from A, all the way over to B. As a DJ, you're always thinking a couple of records ahead. So a lot of times, everyone else is having a really amazing time, and you can't even have that because your job is to be playing chess with yourself.
Be one step ahead.
And actually, one of the best things that I learned how to do was just to enjoy the moments.
And also, you realize that no one really, the feeling of a DJ who is present and there with you is more exciting than them being 3 steps ahead. You know, if something goes wrong, we've experienced it today. But if something goes wrong, being able to just be there in the room with people, they're just people. We're all just people in this room trying to have a good time.
I think, you know, sometimes
taking the fear out of it.
Yeah. I still DJ on records. You know, some days I'm on and it's seamless. And then some days I might DJ and there might be a couple of things where there's like a mistake and it's just slightly out of time. And I used to, again, be like, either try and pretend it's not happening or kind of be so mortified. And actually it's really fun. I've had gigs where I like, the mix is so out that I've stopped the records and be like, you know what, let's try that again. And the whole crowd is like, yeah, cool. And they get into it with you because you're being human.
Yeah.
You know, and I think when you start detaching yourself from the floor and the listeners and you start taking it a bit too seriously, that's when it all starts to kind of unravel.
Completely. It just made me think also, I feel like there's an interesting parallel between thinking about the relationship between the audience and the DJ or the performer. So how so many people turn to music and clubbing and dancing, you know, as a coping mechanism, as a way of self-soothing, expressing themselves, expressing emotion, accessing mindfulness, in a way, and being present in the moment. And there's a parallel there between that and running and exercise in general. And yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, but it was just something that popped into my head.
Well, you guys just asked me those really complex things where I was with you and then the ADHD just kicked in a little bit.
Turned it on you. Yeah, sorry.
My radio retuned and suddenly I was like, oh, okay. You're going to have to ask me that again.
All good. It wasn't even really a question. It was, I guess I was thinking about the parallel between the experience of a dancer, of someone in the crowd, and how they're there to try and access a state of mindfulness, and not a state of mindfulness in the way that we typically think about it, but this feeling of being present in a room with themselves and with other people, not on their phone, listening to the track as it comes in. And the way that with exercise and running, you're kind of trying to access that same, you're kind of, there's a tempo to it, and there's something that's getting you off your phone, on your feet, on the ground in that moment. Yeah.
But I always say to people, it's the only time in my life when the phone's not ringing, a child is not asking for my attention, you know, no one's asking me for their love, and, you know, no one's trying to get hold of me, you know. So actually, it's a really good time for me. You learn how to be comfortable with the feeling of being uncomfortable. A lot of us, basically, when we get to uncomfortable moments in life, we're pulling the parachute cord straight away. We don't want to sit in the uncomfortable moment. Does anyone here use an Octatrack? Because you're all sensible. One guy. Okay, so you know how steep the Octatrack learning curve is. Dude, I've had an Octatrack for like 7 years. And I think in November, I was like, right, Octatrack, 30 minutes a day. We're going in. It was so hard. At one point, I was actually crying in my house. My partner, like, babe, I can't do it. I just can't. I can't. Like, she's like, stop being so silly. Been making music all these years. Get back in the studio. Go and do it. And then finally, I just had this moment of like, oh, I understand it now. Because, you know, each music manufacturer basically speaks a different language. So when they translate the manual, it's kind of like you have to translate it in your brain. So we had that moment. And actually, I realized if I hadn't been learned how to sit in that uncomfortable moment, I would have sold it. Mm-hmm. And now I'm having the benefits of just being there. And I think that's really important to kind of, some days you're going to make tunes, you're going to put them out. No one's going to care. And that's okay. You have to just learn to be like, it's cool, you know, and I think a lot of times what happens, we come into the music industry and it's a bit precious. And we're a bit precious about our involvement in it. And you can't be in it and be precious.
Completely. I relate to that in a big way, this idea of perfectionism. And, you know, in this particular line of work, being a DJ, being a producer, where a lot of the time, obviously some people choose to go about it in a different way, but a lot of the time it involves having a very public persona, you know.
Especially these days, yeah.
Yeah, it involves putting your face out there, and that's quite a vulnerable thing to do. And when we do that, we start to overthink how we're coming across, how we're being perceived. And then along comes, you know, this whole idea, this whole vision of how we want to project our self-image. And a lot of the time that means that, I think it's just started chucking it down outside. And a lot of the time that means that we end up obsessing over things so much that we don't get the thing out.
Yeah.
We don't get it out because we've overthought it so much and we've just run it into the ground.
Yeah.
I'm on that journey of learning, you know, that it doesn't need to be perfect. No one knows what the vision is in your head. And you need to, it's that thing of like, you know, failing in the right direction, falling in the right direction, and keep doing it. And eventually you'll kind of get to that vision that you have in your head, but you can't let the fear of not being perfect enough out there stop you from doing the thing.
2 questions to ask yourself on the back of that. On your 100th birthday, what do you want the people to say about you? Second thing, in the last chapter of the book about your life, what do you want the last sentence to be? I don't want the last sentence to be like, you know what, he was a really great guy and he made a load of tunes, but he got 120 unreleased gig of unreleased tunes sitting on his hard drive.
Yeah.
I don't want people to be saying that. Prolific. You've got to be like a drug dealer with music. If you're that good at music, it's easy to get the ideas out.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
100%.
You're just like, I can do this all day long. A lot of the people I like, you know, like I really like LB, Lewis LB. That guy can make beats all day long. He'll make an 8-part thing that sounds more awesome than the thing that you spent a year, and it will have 4 elements in it because he's that good. Digo, 4 Hero, make tunes all day long. It's easy. And I think when you start getting into this idea of like, I'm just going to be prolific, how many tunes can I make this year? How many tunes can I make and share this year? Even if it's like, because I don't really care about numbers. So the fact that you've now got, you know, a Bandcamp, you got all these platforms that were never around when I first started making music. I just looking like, wow, this is playtime. This is fun. Like, hold it, I can put a tune, make a tune now, put it out for 24 hours, tell my community, and then take it down. Why wouldn't I want to be doing that? Why wouldn't I just want to be just raw out the back of MPC straight to your ears in your speaker? Why wouldn't I want to do that? Why am I searching for this perfection that I don't need to have? My biggest takeaway from my return to DJing after a really long break is the records that people respond to most are the records that are like 20, 30 years old. They're not mixed great. They don't sound great by things that are out now, but you put them on, and I call them my WTF what the fuck records, because someone always comes up as like, what the fuck is that? Like, what is that? Like, yo, man, this record's like 30 years old. You ain't going to find this. You know what I mean? But there's something really magical about the fact that these records made when people didn't necessarily know what they were doing, where they weren't comparing it to other people because there was no internet to be like, oh, blah, 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 has just made this. So there was none of that. It was literally like, let's go down to the club and hear what people are doing.
We have such a challenge these days with how hyper exposed we are. And, you know, like you said, in those days when there was no social media, there was no Spotify, people couldn't see your plays, people couldn't see how many likes you had on a photo. They didn't have to worry about the comparison. And it is a real challenge that we face now.
I think it's only a challenge if you allow it to be a challenge. And my whole thing, especially these days, is about this idea of creating a universe around you, which means that you're just operating in your world. So therefore, what is going on outside doesn't really concern me. Wicked, great. You go and do that. But over here in this camp, we're doing this.
Yeah, I know that one of the things that you wanted to talk about was how to use social media when you hate social media. And, you know, we all have, to some degree, this kind of codependent, toxic relationship with social media.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. So big things for me are mute people who you're finding annoying. It's okay. During the summertime, when it's like super festival season and all the 20 and 30-year-old DJs are kind of flying around the world doing their thing, I just put you on mute. I don't want to see what you're doing, because I know that part of my ego is going to be like, hold on a minute, how come you're getting to play that venue and I'm not? Because I understand what triggers me and what doesn't. So if you're going to be triggering me for the summer months, you're going on mute. That's number one. Two, I want to make sure that my feed in the mornings, because invariably I'm going to wake up, reach for the phone, is bringing positivity and inspiration into my life, as opposed to jealousy, comparison, and so on and so forth. So I'm either going to mute you, or I'm going to unfollow you. I might see you in the club, but if you're one of those people who's like, yo, dude, you unfollowed me. How could you do that? I'm like, you know what? That's the energy I don't need. So it's really important that positive shit.
Yeah.
That positive energy is coming into your phone. The next thing I think is ultimately the idea at the end of the day, social media is a bit like a character. It's a persona. I see it in the running world. Like, I see a lot of people who are like, on the gram, it's all super positive. In the stories, it's, my life is falling apart. So I just, choose your people wisely. And, ultimately, I look at it like this. It's a necessary evil if you want to play that game. So you could do a Jay-Z Rebel and just be like, you know what? I'm done with social media. I'm coming off it completely. I'm a ghost. I'm not there.
Do you think that's doable?
I think it's definitely doable. Because there are certain artists, it's kind of like the only way to get hold of them is, some people you've got to write them a letter. That's okay. That becomes part of your thing.
Your mystique.
I think the hard part is when you're in two worlds and you're trying to be in it and not be in it. If you're in it and you don't really like it, then again, there is no pressure to post. I don't go, a lot of the brands that I work with, they're not really necessarily interested in the big numbers anymore, because they know how the algorithm works. You got like X amount of thousands of people following you, but it's only going out to 5,000. So
more targeted audience.
Yeah, you want to have an audience that's engaged. So eventually, I think it's just like, you just literally sit down and you're like, what do I want this social media platform to ultimately do for me? And if you are one of those people who's like, okay, social media is really important for me for promoting my work, then there's no harm in spending a day watching some tutorials, watching some videos of people who are very good at using it, and finding out the techniques that they're using, and seeing what you can apply to your world. So there's a group of kids that I know who like parkour kids, Stora. They're men now. But, every Monday, their YouTube, the video comes out, 6 p.m. Regardless of what is going on. 6 p.m. on a Monday, the video is out. So what I realized that made me realize is like, okay, consistency is really important, because it's like a cable TV channel. If I come to your cable TV channel and you're missing an action, then I'm going to go to Disney. If Disney's got some Star Wars thing on there, I'm not coming back to you for another 6 weeks. So consistency is really important. And consistency that you can maintain.
Yes.
If your maintenance is I can only post once a week, then pick your day, pick your time, and try and stick to it.
That is so important. Don't set yourself an impossible task. Yeah, I think, it's really easy to, write this list of this plan of, what we're going to do over the next 6 months. And on paper, it looks like, yeah, this should all be totally achievable. But when it comes down to it, when we might not all naturally be that disciplined, we might have a lot of other stuff going on in our lives and it might not be feasible. Go easy on yourself and respond to that. It's all a try. It's all a trial and error.
Yeah.
It might be the case that your initial forecast wasn't realistic. It wasn't achievable. So, but that doesn't mean that you're useless. It doesn't mean that you're not going to achieve your dreams. It just means that you kind of need to rethink the goals, rethink the plan. Rain is getting very loud and
welcome to London.
I feel like it's going to burst through the ceiling.
TikTok is your friend.
TikTok?
Yep. I always say to people, your granny is on Facebook. Your parents that you don't really like, they're on Instagram. Yeah. The next generation of people, of your fans who are like, listen, like, oh, you start listening to me at 16 and you're still listening to me at 26, they're sitting on TikTok. So put your energy, a lot of people I work with and consult with, I say to them, look, Instagram's cool, get on the TikTok, because that's where you can grow a following very, very quickly.
I wanted to ask you just one last thing about what you said about the kind of regularity of having radio is another one for that I found, having a monthly radio show, it's so good for keeping you on top of your music and making sure you make time to find new music. And whether it's just something that you set for yourself or you have a radio show or whatever, it could be something like Charlie said where you put out one track a month or whatever it is. Having that structure that you've set for yourself can be really useful for getting things done.
Structure is really important for any young musician or musician who's trying to make it. If you don't have structure, life gets hard. Again, I remember speaking to Digo one day, 4 Hero, 2000 Black. And I'm like, what are you up to today? And, and I was like, yeah, man, I'm going in the studio, probably going to get there about 8 o'clock at night. Maybe we'll be coming out around 3. I'm like, Digo, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, just come out the studio. I'm like, what? It's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So yeah, I was in there at 7. 7 to 1, bam. That's his schedule. And actually what I realized is flipping my studio hours around, I started making better music. So this idea of let me try and get in the studio whilst everyone else is asleep and the world is asleep. And then by the time I've finished, I'm coming into the world around midday, 1 o'clock, having made something that I'm really happy about, and then I can get on with the rest of my life. Yeah. As opposed to, I'm going through the day, getting pissed off with the world, and then I'm hoping I'm going to get in the studio in the evening and make something special.
Yeah.
Find your time that works for you.
And that, I think that kind of ties into this something that again, I know you're interested in, is this idea of having a mentor, official or unofficial. How you might go about finding one, what the benefits of that are.
We all need someone to bounce ideas off. We all need someone to keep us in check. We all need someone to keep us accountable. And we all need to spend time around people who are more knowledgeable than we are. So how I find my mentors, a lot of time, it might be Instagram. I might just be, you're mentoring me informally just by the fact I'm following what you're doing. If there are people I'm super interested, I'll be like, yo, I'd just really love to have a conversation with you. Send them a message, But the thing I say to people is a mentor's a bit like having a therapist. There's no point in having one if you're not going to act on the advice that they give. And a lot of people, because I mentor a lot of people around the world of various different careers, ages, a lot of people like the idea of saying that, yeah, Charlie Dark's my mentor. But they don't actually like acting on the advice that is given. So you've got to find the teacher who you're actually going to listen to.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask. If there is someone who you do follow, who you do admire, who you think you would love to have a conversation with, they're just a person. You can send them a DM. You might not get one, but you might not get one back. But there's absolutely no harm in reaching out, no harm in trying.
But you have to be realistic. I'd love Andre 3000 to be my mentor right now. And I kind of vaguely know him through various people. And we have been on stages together. But the chances of me DMing Andre and be like, yo, Andre, man needs you to be my mentor, it's impossible. So I've got to kind of find some people who are similar, who may be a bit more likely to respond to me. And if I reach out and they don't respond, I don't take it personally, because we're all busy people.
100%.
And again, that's really important for people to realize, is kind of no one owes you their time. So if they're giving you their time, use it wisely.
Yeah, and it makes me think as well also this idea of the power of 100 and the important, which is essentially, the strengths, the power and importance of your network, of having a network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my theory, and there's something I've based the whole of my career on, is the theory of 100 people. And it's the idea that if you've got 100 people who are around the world who are invested, and in what you do, then you can have a sustainable career and you can build upon that. Now, a lot of us don't have even 20 people who are invested in what we do. So we sit there, we make this music, we, go and DJ, and then we just throw it up in the air and hope that someone is going to come or like what we do. And actually, one of the things that you can do now is you start that mailing list.
Start that Patreon.
Start that mailing list. If you're trying to get on radio and no one's giving you a radio show, start your own radio. Because what is radio in 2025 could be anything. It could just be you once a month putting out a mix in the style of a radio show that you send out to the 100 people on your mailing list. Because ultimately what you want is you want things that people can have of yours that they can play, that other people can hear. Because you never know who's going to be hearing. And
you want to keep exercising that muscle. You want to keep working and practicing your craft all the time.
Look, this is very simple. I've been DJing for 40 years now. My friends laugh at me when I tell them I still practice for an hour a day. They're like, why are you still practicing an hour a day? Like, you're an actual DJ now. You've got an agent. You travel the world. Like, you've made it. Why are you still acting like you've just come into the industry? I'm like, because 16-year-old Charlie, whose parents were like, there's no way you're going to be DJ. No way. Yeah. Whose music teacher was telling him, you'll never have a career in the music industry. That guy practiced because he was so desperate to make it that he would do whatever it took. And what I realized is as I got older, I got more comfortable. And then suddenly there were things that I didn't want to do anymore, but I still wanted to play on the field. You can't do that because the people you're playing against, they're doing that. They're doing the work that you don't want to do. Hard work outworks talent any day of the week. This is the reason why you see a lot of artists out there where you're like, you're not actually that good, but you work really hard. So I have to respect your work ethic. So one of the things I have a list of artists like, I don't really like your music and what you stand for, but I admire your work ethic. So let me break down the work ethic that you're doing in case I can find some things that I can follow on.
Yeah.
Really important. So the 100 is basically just this idea of accumulating a list of 100 people around the world who basically are into what you do. And then you just start making stuff for that 100. And eventually you realize I'm actually making a bit of a career out of just these 100 people. I'm really good, And that's for things that people don't understand. Is like, it's all very amazing having this really big following, but a lot of times these people who've got big following, those people won't put their hand in their pocket or give you their time to endorse what you do. Whereas you've got these other artists where you're like, I don't really understand how you do it, but you seem to have been doing this for a really long time and you're still doing it. Longevity is the key.
And yeah, having people around you who really care and have meaningful care and support for what you do rather than tokenistic support. They're not just there because, you've had like a really big boiler room or whatever. They really believe in what you're doing.
Because they're a fan. Because pre-internet, you had real fans. Because they didn't have this accessibility to you all the time. So actually, if you did something, they came. And eventually you would realize, be like, yo, that front row, you're always at my gigs. You're always there. What's your name? Where do you live?
Yeah, and I think that also ties into this idea of keeping the essence of why you're doing what you're doing at the heart of things, because that's what they connect to.
Yeah.
And yeah, this idea of the why. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? And always kind of reminding yourself of that.
A lot of people are not honest with their why. If I'm really honest with me, I started DJing because I was bullied at school. I didn't feel I really had a voice. And the DJing gave me a voice. And then for a long time, DJing was about revenge. It was like, all this stuff happened to me in my childhood, but now look at me on the stage in control of your emotions. That's unsustainable. In my 50s, what I realized, what I really love about it is sharing. I love the fact of like, I found this record and I don't know if it will work and I'm playing it for you. And oh my God, you're really into it. Hey, that's really cool. Let me go and find 10 more of those. So you always have to keep asking yourself, what is your why? Because the why can change daily, it can change yearly, And if you don't keep track of what your why is, that's when you find yourself in situations where you're saying yes to things that you don't really want to do. Or you find yourself in situations that actually make you feel a bit anxious because you've lost your why. And you've got to be honest with your why, because a lot of us are in music not because we actually love music. There's another reason why we're really doing it.
And actually, unfortunately, sometimes, even if that is the reason, even if that is your why, sometimes it's not enough.
It's not enough.
And
It's
you
not
need
enough.
more.
Like, it's not enough. You know, if you make music, play music, I meet this all the time with young rappers. Like, why do you rap? Yo, man, because I just love music. All right. Then you go to the next person. Yeah, man, because I just love it. So you got 100 people in the room. They're all saying exactly the same thing. So the person that you kind of remember is the one who gives you a little bit more honesty. If I don't do this music thing, I will die. All right. Okay. Well, that sounds quite interesting. Like, well, you know, do you know what I mean? So, but a lot of times people don't want to be honest with yourselves. And the thing about the music industry is when you're not honest with yourself, eventually you get found out. It's like when you meet these people who are like, you know, I just make music, you know, I don't know any music theory and I don't read music books, I don't read books. And you're like, all right, cool, that's great. And then you find yourself in a room with Quincy Jones. And then suddenly you're in a room with all these people and they're all dons of me, like they know it all and you know nothing. So you can't communicate with them.
And so that's something we've talked about before, is approaching it, you know, educating yourself, or taking it seriously, approaching it like it's like a degree, you know?
Yeah, because the thing is, when you take it seriously, good things start to happen.
And also you keep the curiosity alive, you keep the creativity alive.
Yeah. I think it's really important, you know, the curiosity is you have to keep challenging yourself in music. So when it gets to a level where you're like, I'm finding this process easy, then you throw something else in to kind of, you know, just to keep your skills sharp. And that's the thing I love about, you know, when you hang out with real super dons, they keep their skills sharp, regardless of how rich they are, how much money they've made, or how successful they are, or who they know. They keep the skills sharp. Because essentially what they're saying to you is, strip away everything that I've got on this journey, and I'll still do this better than you, because you know what I mean? Because I want it more than you. And again, it's like, you know, people, I think we've reached a point where everyone wants to do things easy and quickly. And easy and quick in 2025, if 100 people, 1,000 people are all doing it easy and quick, and you're doing it hard and difficult, suddenly everyone's interested in you. So it's a bit like making music on an Amiga, and everyone else is on like the latest Mac. You're going to be more interested in the Amiga guy because you're just like, how are you doing that? It's like when I go running and everyone's got super shoes, and then you see someone who's basically showed a light, who comes past and they're like wearing like their mad Converse with holes in and everything's mixed matched, and they're still quicker than you. You're like, oh, okay, that's a bit of a life lesson there.
100%. And I think just to kind of round things off a little bit, this whole conversation has been about, you know, what steps can we take for longevity in the music industry, future-proofing ourselves in this line of work. And
Sleep.
That's it. That's the
It's
number
not
one.
the cousin of death. It's like, don't listen to Nas. It's not the cousin of death. It's highly important.
Yeah. I know there's two things very quickly. One is, you know, how can you diversify the work that you do, your career, thinking about alternative avenues of work, and then the exit plan.
Okay, cool. Right, so diversing avenues of work. Again, you get a whiteboard, put it up in your house, and you write down all the possible ways that my music could be used other than how I'm doing it at the moment. So old school heads are just like, I make music and then I play it in the club. The next generation came along and were like, hold on a minute, like this TV thing, this streaming thing is quite a thing. So maybe I could make music, play it in the club and get it onto streaming. Then the next lot come along like, oh, you know what? I might just make music, put it in the club, put it on streaming, and also make sure that I'm kind of sending it towards sporting events. There are so many avenues where music can thrive. Here's a quick one for you. Festival season. What do most people do? They go to festivals. How do they get there? They either drive or they take the train. And it's boring. Maybe you might want to be the DJ or producer who makes the driving to Glastonbury soundtrack. 4 hours that you just put out maybe a week beforehand, and you tell your people, like, you know, you're going to Glastonbury? have a listen to this mix on the way. Let me know what you think. My whole thing is like, when I started Run Dem, the thing I realized, I was doing a lot of work with the Arts Council. The thing about the Arts Council is you apply for money and the form is hard. And then basically there's all these stipulations that you have to do in return for the fact that they've given you the money. And what I clocked was, right, hold on a minute, Olympics is coming along and sports brands, they'll be like, oh, we've got no money for the event, but the drinks budget is 50 grand. Why don't I go and talk to some sports brands? And then I started to talk to sports brands. And then now everyone just goes and talks to sports brands. So it's a bit saturated. Meanwhile, the tech brands are sitting here being like, we're cool. We want to do cool stuff with cool musicians and people, but no one wants to talk to the tech brands. So there's so many different places, but you have to take a step back and look around and be like, what are the opportunities? Even if no one else is in that field, maybe you're the trail runner, you're the person that breaks down the door and comes through. Quick one. Here's one. I've got a 7-month-old son. Imogen Heap has got this song. Ring, 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 the bells. Like, listen, that child could be wailing. As soon as you put that song on, the tears just stop. And I was sitting there thinking, why am I not making a Baby Lullabies album? Hold on a minute. Well, you're laughing. It's like, I know a couple of DJs that own a string of nurseries. Do you know how much nursery fees are per month? All right, I'll let you go and find that out. But essentially, they've got other streams. So it sounds funny because your heroes aren't doing it. Because Pharrell hasn't got round to it yet.
And this is the business of it, isn't it?
It's the business of it. So you basically, wherever there's an opportunity, plug the gap. And nothing, my thing is basically like, think big. Airlines. Making music for lifts. Doing soundtracks for hotels. There's all this stuff that you can do. And a lot of times what happens is the opportunity is there, but they think you're too cool to have the conversation. So sometimes you got to go to them. Shoreditch, big art hotel, like big massive hotel there. I guarantee if one of you went there and said, you know what, I just made you this soundtrack, just especially for you. Maybe you could play it in the lift. When everyone who goes into that hotel has got 36 floors has to get into the lift. So someone's going to hear what you're doing. You never know where your next opportunity is going to come from if you don't try.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's something. Those are things that we can do at any age, and eventually there will, for most of us, come a time when we don't want to be playing in clubs every weekend.
Yeah.
We have a family or whatever it is, and you don't want to be up until 3, 4, 5, 6 a.m.
No, I think. The exit plan is really important because a lot of us kind of start in our bedrooms and we're doing it because it's fun and it's cool. And then it becomes like a bit of a business, but we don't actually think, how am I going to get out of this? So then we find ourselves in a situation where we have to keep doing it because we've not set up any alternatives. It's easy to pack your record box up and go and travel around the world when you're 30 years old. When you're 54, like I am, the record box is heavy. You know what I mean? It gets to like 2 o'clock, 2, 3 o'clock. I'm like, I'm a bit tired now. Like, I want to go home. So actually thinking about the exit plan. So 3 things you've got to think about. Where do I want to be living when I give this thing up? How do I want to be living? How much money would I like to have in the bank? And what would be the other thing that I'd like to go and do aside from this? Because I know at one point I'm going to DJ publicly for an audience for the very last time. It's like playing football with your mates as a kid and your mum be like, your dinner's on, come in. And you do that for the last time, you never do it again. At some point, you're going to make that last beat. You're going to play that last record. So where do you want to be in life? And it's okay to write that down and to be working towards that so it doesn't catch you by surprise. Because the thing I always say to you is, you want to stop when you're ready to stop, not because a 20-year-old or someone who doesn't know your history doesn't think you're relevant anymore, or not important anymore, or not worthy anymore. Or the opportunities are dried up. You stop when you want to stop. So start putting things in place to make that happen.
Yeah. That feels like a fitting moment to wrap things up.
Yeah, I talk a lot, so that's enough for me.
But thank you so much, Charlie, for joining us, sharing your wisdom. I really enjoyed talking with you. And thank you everyone for listening.
They listened to us and they wrote some stuff down as well. It was good, man.
Yeah.
It's good.
A couple of very quick plugs. Our next masterclass and party will be at Strange Brew in Bristol in partnership with News Levels. We're very excited to have the one and only Jordan, News Radio's Bex, and our very own Luvandula playing that event. Tickets are on sale now, so grab one if you want to come. They're on RA. That one is for the audience watching online, as I'm guessing most of you are based in London. But, who knows? Maybe you want to make the trip to Bristol. And in case you weren't aware, you can watch all of our Year 1 masterclasses back on the Rhythm Section YouTube channel. We've got ones up there with Moxie, Bradley, Tash LC, Jordan Rakai, and Ninja Tunes Alex Ives. So, yeah, they're all free and available on our YouTube channel.